The chilly October morning of 2019 began with an unusual disturbance on Willow Creek Street, in the suburbs of Dover, Delaware. 6 unmarked police cars quietly pulled up in front of a 2-story beige house situated in the middle of a quiet residential neighborhood. Neighbors peered through their curtains as officers wearing bulletproof vests and state badges took positions around the area. Inside, David Brooks, 48 years old, was brewing his morning coffee, a habit he had maintained for years, ever since moving to Arizona following the mysterious death of his ex-wife, Elena Brooks. A rapid knocking sounded at 7:32 a.m. David Brooks, Delaware State Police. "We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the 2009 disappearance of Elena Brooks." The officers later described how his hand trembled slightly as he set the porcelain mug down in the sink, yet his face remained strangely calm, as if he had known this quiet morning would be the last one he spent as a free man. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. October 2009 in Dover, the peaceful town located in central Delaware, welcomed the first days of autumn with cold air and the damp smell of fallen leaves. The narrow streets around the government buildings and the old church district were lit early, pale yellow light reflecting off the thick layer of fog. This was a place where everyone knew each other, where even the smallest change easily caught a neighbor's eye. Elena Brooks, 37 years old, was a youth Bible study teacher at First Baptist Church of Dover. She lived with her husband, David Brooks, and their 2 young children in a residential area in the southern part of town. On Saturday evening, the church held a rehearsal for the upcoming winter service. Elena arrived early, carrying her sheet music and a thick brown coat. The rehearsal ran longer than planned. By the time the clock neared 9, everyone was gradually packing up their instruments. Those who stayed until the end remembered her gathering her things, quietly saying, "See you tomorrow morning," then quickly walking out to the parking lot. One woman from the congregation recalled that Elena paused for a moment, looking around as if searching for someone, then opened the door of her silver Toyota Camry, started the engine, and drove off. The route she took was the shortest way home, just a 10-minute drive through quiet residential streets, cutting across a few empty fields, and turning onto Route 13. Outside, the temperature was dropping, fog rising from the ground, headlights dissolving into the cold mist. When the last people left the church, the parking lot was empty. At the Brooks home, the clock struck 11, and her car still hadn't returned. David stood by the living room window, calling his wife. The phone rang for a long time before going silent. He tried several more times, still no answer. The kids were asleep, the house steeped in silence, broken only by the steady tick of the wall clock. David stepped out onto the porch, turned on the light, and stared down the fog-covered road, but no headlights appeared. By midnight, he contacted a few people from the church, asking if anyone had seen Elena stop somewhere after rehearsal. No one knew anything more. The night dragged on, cold and thick with dampness. The next morning, as the pale light of dawn filtered through the wet trees, David Brooks called the Dover Police Department. His voice shook and was hoarse from staying up all night as he reported that his wife, Elena Brooks, had left First Baptist Church the previous evening and had not returned home. The dispatcher recorded the initial details and transferred the call to the unit handling the South Dover residential area. Officer Mark Heller, on the morning shift, took the case and asked David to come to headquarters to provide full information. In the small room lit by dim fluorescent lights, he sat across from Heller, eyes tired, hands tightly gripping his wedding ring. The first question, "When did you last see your wife?" "Last night, before she left for choir practice. She said she'd be home right after." Heller noted every detail. Female, 37 years old, approximately 5'6", brown hair, blue eyes, wearing a thick brown coat and leather shoes. Vehicle, silver Toyota Camry, Delaware plate, 6A7, Men 92. He asked further about her usual route, possible stops, whether anyone was with her. David shook his head, saying Elena rarely went out at night except to church. The completed statement was signed. The description and most recent photo of Elena were copied and uploaded to the state database. Lieutenant Mason Gray, the morning shift commander, received the report just before 9 o'clock. He reviewed all the information: time she left home, usual travel route, vehicle condition, and the victim's activities in the previous week. Gray ordered the dispatch center to contact the First Baptist Church management to verify the previous evening's schedule. Results confirmed Elena was present at the rehearsal and left alone around 8:45 p.m. No one noticed anything unusual. Only one staff member said she seemed in a hurry, her face slightly pale, but still smiling as she said goodbye. Heller recorded the information and sent the initial report to command. At the same time, the Internal Communications Unit prepared a missing person bulletin. Elena Brooks, female, 37 years old, missing after leaving First Baptist Church, Dover, on the evening of October 17, 2009. The bulletin was sent to local radio stations and neighboring county police forces. The next morning, after the critical first 12 hours had passed with no new leads or information, Lieutenant Mason Gray ordered the case escalated to urgent search status. In the Dover Police Department map room, he gathered the investigation team, spread out the map of South Dover, and circled a 5-mile radius from the Brooks home, connecting it to First Baptist Church. This was the area believed to be the route Elena Brooks may have taken on the night she disappeared. The meeting was brief but tense. All on-site police forces and the Kent County Rescue Unit were mobilized. In addition to professional personnel, more than 20 volunteers, mostly town residents, church members, and Brooks family neighbors, signed up to help. Police divided the forces into 5 teams, each led by 1 officer, 3 police personnel, and a civilian support group. Team 1 was responsible for searching Route 13. Team 2 covered the southern residential area. Team 3 moved into the woods bordering the park. Team 4 focused around the lake. The final team handled information distribution, flyers, and media contact. The order was repeated 3 times: search in a straight line, do not miss any area. Every discovery, no matter how small, must be recorded, photographed, and GPS marked. Around 9 in the morning, the first team left headquarters amid the sound of Jeep engines and radio chatter, mixed with the cold autumn wind. The damp air made the road surface glisten with dew. The forest on both sides leading to Killen's Pond was covered in a thick layer of wet leaves. The K-9 unit from Dover Air Force Base was deployed, bringing 4 tracking dogs that had been scented with Elena's coat provided by her husband. The dogs were released at the park entrance, following trails along the lake's edge. Every few hundred meters, police stopped to note the time, wind direction, and the dog's reaction. By 11 o'clock, they paused at a low-lying area near the forest edge, sniffed for a few minutes, then turned west toward a trail leading to Route 13. Gray, monitoring via radio, ordered the nearby team to check the intersection area. Police and volunteers moved in a line, scanning for unusual objects, broken branches, tire skid marks, or pieces of fabric that might have fallen. They marked each suspicious point with small orange stakes, photographed it, and sent coordinates to command. A patrol helicopter was deployed to circle overhead, taking photos of the entire area from the lake to the southern clearing, using thermal imaging lenses, but detecting no heat signatures beyond the damp trees. Simultaneously, the water rescue team launched small boats on the lake, using older sonar equipment towed by cable to scan the bottom. The screen showed mostly wavy, blurred signals, mostly debris, rotten logs, or rocks. The report sent back clearly stated, no objects detected matching human size. At noon, the second volunteer group distributed flyers around downtown Dover, stores, and residential areas along Route 13. Many residents stopped to ask questions. A few vaguely remembered seeing a silver car pass by, but couldn't confirm the time. Heller noted these statements, filing them under unverified. When the sun was high, Gray sent 2 more rescue units to check the wooden bridge over the small river branch near the park. The water flowed weakly, the bottom full of rotten leaves, no signs of anything having fallen. In the afternoon, the search teams focused on the eastern forest of Killen's Pond, where the terrain was more complex. Police used probes, flashlights, and head-mounted cameras to check every crevice, trail, tree hollow, and abandoned bunker. Suspicious spots were marked with fluorescent paint. The K-9 team was released again at 3 p.m., but the scent trail remained faint. The dogs quickly lost direction. Forensic specialists noted that thick fog and high humidity likely diluted the scent. By late afternoon, after 8 continuous hours of movement, the compiled report was sent to headquarters. The entire 5-mile radius had been searched, with no traces, evidence, or signals related to Elena Brooks found. Gray held a quick meeting with Heller and the K-9 team leader to reassess the map. Searched paths were marked in green, covering mostly forest and open land. He concluded that the victim likely did not leave the area via main roads and ordered the search radius expanded by 1 more mile the next day. As darkness fell and wind shifted from the river, the temperature dropped quickly. Search teams gradually withdrew to the center under scattered headlight beams in the forest. The final report of the long day stated, search within a 5-mile radius, full check of all routes, and Killen's Pond Park, no physical evidence or direct witnesses found. Phase 1 concluded, moving to data evaluation. Lieutenant Gray signed off at 19:30, drawing a thick line on the map around the searched area before leaving the command room amid the sound of wind rattling the window frames and the lingering smell of wet earth from an old rain. On the morning of October 20th, 2009, an emergency meeting was convened in the Dover Police Department map room. Lieutenant Mason Gray stood before the large wall map, beneath stacks of reports and printouts of the previous day's search results. The entire 5-mile area around the Brooks home had been searched, but nothing noteworthy was found. Gray drew another thick red line southward, where the boundary of Killen's Pond State Park extended to low-lying land bordering the lake. He decided to expand the search into this area, designating it the focus of Day 2. At 8 o'clock, the Delaware sky was covered in low clouds and thick fog. 2 patrol teams departed first, carrying detailed maps, compasses, radios, and handheld GPS devices. The park spanned over 300 hectares with complex terrain, including oak forests, a lake, and many winding trails. Park management was mobilized to assist, temporarily closing the main gate and suspending all visitor activities for the day. At the starting point, Heller and the technical team set up a field command post, pitching tents, setting up radio systems, position markers, and a coordinate logbook. The K-9 unit was released at the northern forest entrance. The tracking dogs sniffed around the damp strip near the gate, moving slowly toward the lake. Around 9:30, Scout Team 3, walking along the western trail, discovered 2 faint tire tracks imprinted in the wet mud, one deep, one shallow, with a wheelbase of about 1.4 meters, matching the size of a mid-size sedan. Gray received the report and immediately ordered measurements, photos, soil samples, and comparison with the tire specifications of the 2002 Toyota Camry registered to Elena Brooks. Preliminary results from the mobile technical unit showed high similarity between the tread pattern in the mud and the manufacturer's data. He ordered a 1-mile radius around the discovery point cordoned off, stakes placed, and the area restricted to outsiders. The search team split into 3 directions. One group followed the main trail deeper into the forest, the second circled down to the lake's edge, and the third cut across the low forest to check soft ground sections. Overhead, a Public Safety Bureau helicopter flew low to photograph the entire area, identifying trail turns and small paths leading to the main road. Heller coordinated continuously via radio, logging each new coordinate sent in. By nearly noon, the K-9 team returned to the clearing east of the lake. The dogs reacted weakly, sniffed around the tire tracks, then lost the scent. The report sent to command noted unconfirmed scent signal. Gray ordered further checks of the dense forest bordering the water, an area with heavy fallen leaves and wet mud that could retain tracks. Another group moved toward the wooden bridge over the small river branch, where the terrain was low, the ground soft and difficult to traverse. They probed every meter, using metal rods to check deep depressions. Some spots showed narrow skid marks, possibly from a vehicle turning or swerving sharply. Images were taken, numbered KP-03, and sent to the data room. Meanwhile, the water rescue team launched 2 small boats on the lake, deploying sonar in a fan pattern. The screen showed dense shadow areas, but no objects shaped like a human body. On shore, officers and park staff searched temporary parking lots, empty campsites, and tool storage sheds. No vehicles were abandoned, and no personal items were found. In the afternoon, Gray gathered the entire team at the temporary command post, pointing to the newly drawn red circle on the map. The entire north and west of Killen's Pond was marked as checked. He ordered the sweep continued southward, where the terrain was flatter with many trails leading to the highway. The K-9 team rested briefly, then was released again from the intersection of the 2 main trails. The dogs sniffed around the sparse forest, occasionally stopping and changing direction, but showing no strong reaction. Heller recorded the reaction level as weak, unconfirmed, filing it with the tire track data and each team's coordinates. At 16:30, as light faded, Team 4 returned to report they had checked the entire lake edge, measuring the distance from the tire track location to the water's edge. Approximately 800 meters. No skid marks, glass fragments or metal objects were found. Gray noted the day's provisional conclusion, evidence of a vehicle compatible with a Toyota Camry moving through. Time undetermined, no actual vehicle or belongings discovered. All photos, soil samples and measurements were sealed and transferred to the technical lab for analysis. He ordered a guard post maintained at the park gate overnight to protect the scene and requested teams compile reports for the next day's supplemental search plan. At the end of the day, as technicians dismantled the sonar equipment and folded portable maps, Gray stood gazing at the lake gradually fading into the fog, the map now covered in new red circles, extending around the Killen's Pond forest, the only remaining focal point in the search for Elena Brooks. On the afternoon of October 21, 2009, the search entered its 3rd day under a foggy Delaware sky and cold wind. After 2 fruitless days of sweeping, Lieutenant Mason Gray decided to concentrate forces on a deeper check of the southern area of Killen's Pond Park, where many trails intersected and the low marshy terrain was likely to retain vehicle tracks. At approximately 13:50, as Patrol Team 3, led by Officer Mark Heller, moved along the second trail, they spotted a faintly reflective object among the sparse trees, about 200 meters off the main path. Approaching, the team members realized it was the rear end of a car, silver, covered in a thin layer of mud and fallen leaves. Heller reported to command, provided coordinates, and requested the area be temporarily sealed. Lieutenant Gray arrived on scene at 14:25. After confirming the license plate 6A7 Men 92 matched Elena Brooks's registration, he ordered a 200-meter security perimeter established, warning barriers erected, and 2 guard posts set up at the trail and lake-adjacent side to keep outsiders out. The discovery site was on damp ground with tall grass and thick mud, with no direct road access from the main route, only reachable via a narrow pedestrian trail. At a glance, the silver Toyota Camry appeared intact. Its front end slightly tilted downhill, the right front wheel slightly sunk into the soil, indicating it had been parked there for at least 1 to 2 days. All doors were closed, windows streaked with dried rain and dust, no one inside. Gray ordered a temporary tent erected to protect the scene from night fog and wind. The forensic technical team dispatched from downtown Dover, 4 members, arrived with crime scene cameras, fingerprint kits, distance measuring tools, and soil sample boxes. Heller was responsible for logging, photographing the overall scene and every vehicle detail, wheel angles, front-end direction, door positions, tire tracks on the ground. During the initial examination, they noted the driver's seat pushed far back, the left side mirror misaligned, the gear shift in P. The floor had some dry leaves, the footmats damp and speckled with mud, indicating the driver's door had been opened in wet conditions. On the passenger side, the seatbelt was pulled halfway out and not retracted. Wearing gloves, Heller opened the door and observed the interior, the dashboard lightly dusted, no personal items, phone or documents. The trunk was empty, except for 2 bottles of spring water, a neatly folded thin blanket, and a box of tissues. The right rear door had a dark soil streak, a sample was scraped off. Gray ordered the vehicle's tilt measured with a handheld device, confirming a 7-degree lean to the right, indicating uneven ground subsidence. One technician crouched to examine the rear wheels, noticing a small amount of reddish-brown clay stuck around the tire rims, different from the local soil, suggesting the car had traveled through different terrain before stopping. The clay sample was collected, labeled KP V1, and sealed in a bag. Around the parking area, there were no signs of a struggle or heavy skidding, but near the passenger door on the damp ground were 2 faint shoe prints, pointing inward, foot length approximately 28 centimeters, likely men's shoes. Heller photographed them, measured, and made silicone casts, labeling them FP07. The entire documentation process took over 3 hours. At 17:45, as light began to fade, the technical team completed photography and sample collection. A specialized tow truck was called in, using cables and metal plates under the front wheels to pull the vehicle onto the flatbed without disturbing the old tracks. Before moving, Gray and the forensic representative signed the sealing report, affixing control seals to the driver's door, hood, trunk, and handles. The entire discovery site was fenced with wire mesh and handed over to Park Police for overnight guard. The vehicle arrived at the Dover Police Department Forensic Garage at 1910. Gray's end-of-day report, sent to headquarters, stated, "Silver Toyota Camry discovered, owner Elena Brooks, at the edge of Killen's Pond Forest. Vehicle intact, no occupant, no signs of collision. Soil, shoe prints, tire clay, and organic material inside collected. Vehicle sealed and transferred to Central Forensic Unit for examination." In the final entry of the day's log, he added one short but firm line: "Vehicle recovery phase completed, victim's location or condition still undetermined." On the morning of October 22, 2009, the silver Toyota Camry bearing license plate 6A7 M92 was brought into the Dover Police Department's forensic garage for a detailed examination. Lieutenant Mason Gray was present at the scene along with 2 criminalistics technicians, Daniel Quinn and Rachel Lee. The vehicle was placed in a well-lit, enclosed bay with a covered roof and dry concrete floor to prevent any external contamination. The seal report was opened in the presence of all 3 individuals, and the systematic inspection of every component began. Quinn circled the vehicle, documenting the exterior condition. The silver paint was intact, with no obvious scratches or signs of significant impact. The front right tire still had reddish-brown mud clinging to it, matching the soil sample collected from the recovery site. The tires were not flat, and pressure was stable. On the hood were a few streaked dust patterns from old rain. The windshield was clean, and the wipers were in the rest position. Both the driver's and passenger's doors were locked, with all windows fully closed. When unlocked with the key, the technicians noted that all interior lights remained off, despite the battery still holding a weak charge. The fuel gauge read E, confirming the tank was empty. Gray ordered the odometer checked. The miles driven since the last fill-up totaled 243, which did not align with Elena's usual driving habits as previously described by her husband. Inside the cabin, the driver's seat was adjusted farther back than the average position for someone 5'6" inches tall, more suitable for a taller individual. On the driver's side floor mat were dried mud smears and a shoe print larger than a typical women's size. The steering wheel was clean, showing no sweat marks or smudges, though the shift knob had a faint indentation. Heller took close-up photographs and added them to the file. The dashboard contained no documents, phone, or personal items. The glove compartment was empty, except for a small folded plastic bag containing tissues. Ultraviolet light revealed no obvious blood or biological fluids. Trace samples were collected from the steering wheel, gear shift, and door handles for DNA testing. In the rear seat, the seat belts were pulled out halfway. The leather upholstery had a few small shiny particles adhering to it, suspected to be salt or sand grains. These were collected separately in sealed vials. In the trunk, a thorough check of all panels and plastic crevices revealed no scratches or hidden objects. The trunk liner was clean, except for two long brown hairs, approximately 18 centimeters each, stuck in the right corner. They were carefully removed, sealed, and labeled H1 and H2. The fuel tank was opened for inspection. It was nearly completely empty, with only a faint gasoline vapor escaping. No unusual chemical odors were detected. When jump-started from an external source, the engine turned over slowly but would not catch, consistent with having run out of fuel earlier. The lighting system, radio and air conditioning did not function. All windows operated normally, with no binding or damage. Underneath the vehicle, a layer of dried mud mixed with small gravel was found, differing in color from the soil at the recovery location, suggesting the car had traveled over different terrain. The technician noted grayish-brown mud, possibly riverbank or construction site soil. Gray ordered this sample, collected and labeled G04. After completing the full vehicle examination, the forensic team took overall and detailed photographs of key areas: steering wheel, pedals, driver's floor, trunk, and door handles. All data was saved to a dedicated hard drive, with a copy forwarded to headquarters. The preliminary report indicated no mechanical damage or collision evidence, depleted fuel, interior lights off, no obvious physical evidence or blood. The shoe print, driver's seat position, and unusual mileage prompted Gray to draft a note of suspicion, possibility that someone other than the owner drove the vehicle before it was abandoned. He signed the report and sent copies to the investigative unit. At the end of the session, the car was covered, resealed, and returned to secured forensic storage under case number 09, DSP 1173. Gray's internal report to command stated clearly, vehicle examination completed. No direct biological traces detected, but anomalies exist in seat position, footprints, and travel distance. Recommend considering criminal factors in the missing person hypothesis. On the afternoon of October 22, 2009, after finishing the vehicle report, Lieutenant Mason Gray decided to formally interview the victim's family members. The first interview took place in Dover Police Department Interview Room 2, attended by David Brooks, Elena's husband, and his attorney. The room was quiet, except for the hum of the recording device and the harsh white light shining on the metal table. Gray began with basic questions: the last time he saw his wife, her daily routines, and the usual route between home and the church. David stated that on the evening of October 17th, Elena left the house at 8 p.m. to attend choir practice and said nothing unusual. When asked when he realized she hadn't returned, he replied, "Around midnight," despite earlier reports showing he had begun calling her repeatedly after 10 o'clock p.m. Gray asked him to confirm the timeline, but David repeated that he was not sure. "Maybe I got it wrong." Throughout the interview, he maintained an even tone and calm expression. When asked about their marriage, David said they had minor disagreements, but nothing serious, and that Elena sometimes felt stressed from church work. Gray noted, cooperative, but lacking visible emotion. He then shifted to the vehicle, informing David that the car had been found in the woods, out of gas, with no evidence inside. David appeared surprised, asking, "Her car was there?" and then fell silent for several seconds. When asked where Elena usually filled up, he said the Royal Farm Station, but credit card statements from the previous 2 weeks showed no transactions there. Further inconsistency arose when Gray asked about the driver's seat position. David claimed Elena, being tall, always kept the seat far back, yet service records from the dealership showed it previously adjusted nearly 8 centimeters closer. These details were documented in the transcript. At the end, Gray asked directly, "Did you drive that car at all last week?" David hesitated briefly before answering, "Yes, I took it to get washed." Heller later checked credit card records for car wash transactions. None existed. The interview concluded and was signed at 5:30 p.m. as the first formal statement. The following day, Gray brought in Elena's mother, Patricia Henders, to corroborate information. She said her last conversation with her daughter was the morning of October 17th. Elena sounded cheerful, with no signs of stress or worry. Regarding the Brooks marriage, she said only that they had quiet periods, but Elena trusted her husband. Gray noted this and compared it to David's earlier statements. A church friend of Elena's, Marjorie Lane, was also interviewed. She recalled that after choir practice on the 17th, Elena left in a hurry after receiving a short phone call in the parking lot, sounding a bit tense. The caller's number was unknown, but the time matched 8:43 p.m., according to church records. Heller logged the information and forwarded it to technical services for tracing. By that afternoon, all statements were typed and added to case file 09, DSP 1173. When collating the transcripts, Gray identified at least 3 inconsistencies: the timeline of David's first missing person call, the driver's seat distance, and the claimed use of the vehicle the previous week. Additionally, David's emotional response throughout was assessed as unusually calm. The preliminary report to command stated, based on vehicle data and inconsistent statements from next of kin, the case exhibits irregularities. Recommend changing status from missing persons to suspicious missing persons and continuing investigation with possible criminal elements. At the end of the day, when signing the file transfer, Gray added a final note in his duty log: internal suspicion forming, need to examine family connections and financial activity in the period prior to disappearance. After Elena Brooks's missing person file was reclassified as suspicious missing person, Lieutenant Mason Gray requested the Criminalistics Unit coordinate with Delaware State Police Traffic Division to reanalyze the victim's entire route on the night of October 17, 2009. The goal was to precisely determine the path from First Baptist Church Dover to the Brooks residence and explain the unexplained time gap between Elena leaving the church and her husband beginning to call her. Heller was assigned to collect traffic camera footage along Route 13, the main artery connecting downtown Dover to the southern suburbs. Camera coverage in 2009 was limited. Only 4 state-operated cameras existed, each retaining footage for 7 days. The team extracted all recordings between 8:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. on October 17. At the Lockerman Street intersection camera, a silver Toyota Camry was captured passing at 8:52 p.m., approximately 7 minutes after Elena left the church. The vehicle was in the correct lane, traveling at normal speed, heading south. The next camera, near the Roosevelt neighborhood, recorded a similar vehicle at 8:57 p.m. Due to the low angle, the plate was not visible, but the make and color were clear. Gray ordered frame enhancement and comparison of taillight design and logo placement. Results showed an 80% match with Elena's car. The final 2 cameras near the edge of Killen's Pond recorded no sign of the vehicle. The period from 9 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. contained no matching images. Gray marked a red line on the map connecting confirmed sightings. The last confirmed point was the Roosevelt intersection, 3.5 miles from where the car was found. He asked Heller to cross-reference topographic maps for side roads between the 2 points. 3 secondary routes were identified, one into a new housing development, one dirt road toward Killen's Pond, and one small loop past an abandoned farm. Given the car's recovery location in woods bordering the park, the second route was deemed most probable. For further clarity, technicians created a detailed timeline. Elena left the church at 8:45 p.m., appeared on the first camera at 8:52 p.m., passed Roosevelt at 8:57 p.m., then vanished from recordings. Normal travel time from that intersection to the park turnoff was about 6 minutes. Yet David's first call to her phone was logged at 10:05 p.m., leaving an unexplained gap of over 30 minutes. Heller produced a timeline chart marking 3 points. Church departure. Roosevelt camera, first call. Gray requested verification of the Royal Farms gas station where David said Elena usually stopped, located between the two cameras. Transaction logs showed no activity on Elena's card, and the station's security camera recorded no Camry during the relevant window. This strengthened the theory that the car turned off the main route after Roosevelt. To rule out time sync errors, system clocks were compared to state standard time. The difference was 1 minute and did not affect analysis. Gray compiled everything into an electronic map, yellow for confirmed sightings, red for the missing segment. Staring at the numbers on screen, he wrote in his log, "Unexplained gap, 32 minutes, segment between Roosevelt intersection and Killen's Pond Forest." A preliminary report was completed that night, sent to command with a request to expand ground searches along the secondary road into the park. Gray's handwritten conclusion read, "Most likely route, First Baptist Church, Route 13, right onto Roosevelt, Killen's Pond Access Road. Actual travel time exceeds normal. Assumption, stopped or intercepted on this segment. All images, charts, and coordinates were saved under case subsection 09, DSP 1173, T, marking completion of the route analysis phase." On the morning of October 23, 2009, after confirming the unexplained 30-plus minute gap, Lieutenant Mason Gray redirected search efforts to the residential area around the Brooks home. The objective was to sweep side streets, paths, and vacant lots within a 1-mile radius of the residence to determine whether Elena's car had returned to the neighborhood before being abandoned at Killen's Pond. At 8 a.m., 2 four-person search teams were formed, supported by mobile forensics and state police geologists. Heller led Team 1 along Willow Creek Road, the connector between the Brooks neighborhood and Route 13, an area with multiple undeveloped lots. Team 2 surveyed eastward, covering empty houses and a small public field bordering woods. Each sector was numbered on the map with red-painted wooden stakes. At 9:20 a.m., Heller radioed headquarters about a vacant lot approximately 3,000 square meters behind houses 112, 118, Willow Creek. The ground was damp with short grass and showed multiple overlapping tire tracks, including 2 deep, clearly defined parallel tracks spaced 1.4 meters apart with a tread pattern matching the Toyota Camry's tires previously documented. Technicians measured and determined the tracks entered from the access path, continued about 20 meters inward, then stopped in a shallow depression. There was no clear turnaround mark, only a faint single track leading back out. Gray arrived on scene at 10 a.m., ordered the lot sealed, and marked a 30-meter radius around the tracks. Soil and mud samples were collected from 4 points: start, middle, end of tracks, and surrounding area, placed in foil bags labeled W01 through W04. The mud in the ruts contained small gravel and gray-brown clay with fine sand grains, distinct from the red soil at Killen's Pond. Gray directed that these be compared with mud previously scraped from the Camry's wheels. Concurrently, Team 2 canvassed backyards adjacent to the lot, interviewing residents about any unusual vehicles or noises on the night of October 17. An elderly man at 120 Willow Creek recalled hearing a weak engine sound and seeing headlights sweep past his window around 9 p.m., but assumed it was a neighbor. The information was logged, though the exact time remained unconfirmed. Heller photographed the entire area with a wide-angle lens, noting GPS coordinates, light direction, and terrain slope. Near the end of the tire tracks, a technician located several shallow shoe impressions, pattern unclear, possibly from a pedestrian. These were sketched and photographed close-up, but the soft soil prevented precise size determination. After sample collection, the team continued sweeping nearby areas, including a temporary dumpster, roadside edges, and gaps between houses. Probes and UV light were used to search for biological material. No reactions. No purse, clothing, or items belonging to Elena were found. By midday, rising temperature and sunlight were drying the ground and fading the tracks. Gray ended collection at the lot, secured it with caution tape, and had all samples numbered, placed in a mobile cooler, and transported to the lab along with a detailed scene diagram. That afternoon, searches expanded westward along the neighborhood connector to the highway, checking drainage ditches and roadside grass. No suspicious items. The October 23 summary report stated, completed residential sweep around Brooks' home, located vacant lot with tire tracks, consistent with subject Toyota Camry. Collected soil mud samples, no body or tangible evidence recovered. Lieutenant Gray signed the conclusion, closing the residential search phase, while the command center map grew thicker with overlapping red circles around the small house on Willow Creek, the increasingly puzzling center of the disappearance. 3 weeks after the initial report, every search effort for Elena Brooks had yielded nothing. Key areas around Killen's Pond, Route 13, and the Willow Creek neighborhood had been repeatedly covered by sonar helicopter, K-9 units, and local manpower with no new traces found. The collected evidence, tire tracks, soil samples, a few faint shoe prints, lacked definitive value. The Dover Police Department's cumulative report showed over 240 search hours and 38 forensic samples submitted, all negative for human DNA or related biological material. Lieutenant Mason Gray held a full case review on November 6, 2009. In the map room, dense red circles surrounded the Brooks home in Killen's Pond Park, yet none pointed to a concrete resolution. Heller reviewed the data inventory, traffic camera images, witness statements, forensic reports. There was no direct evidence Elena ever left Dover, nor signs of assault or self-harm. The 30-plus minute gap remained unsolved. Some officers suggested expanding beyond Kent County, but Gray felt there was insufficient justification for federal coordination. In his report to command he wrote, "Insufficient elements to establish criminal activity. No body or conclusive evidence. Case status, missing person, cause undetermined." Heller was tasked with updating the Brooks family. David Brooks came to headquarters that afternoon and signed acknowledgement of continued cooperation. When asked again about his wife's habits, he replied vaguely that she might have needed some quiet time. The response was noted but not included in the official report due to lack of corroboration. On November 8, Elena Brooks's file was administratively changed to missing adult. Undetermined, meaning an adult missing for unknown reasons, no evidence of crime, and no confirmation of death. The information was entered into the national NCIC system and circulated to neighboring agencies. Search zones were released. The Killen's Pond checkpoint dismantled. The victim's vehicle remained in forensic storage. Remaining samples were sealed in Dover PD storage room 2. At the bottom of the final summary report, Gray wrote by hand, "No results, no reasonable explanation. Elena Brooks remains on the undetermined missing list." He closed the nearly 200-page file, placed it in the metal cabinet under designation 09, DSP 1173. In the dim light of the command room, the wall map stayed up, its red marks testifying to 3 weeks of meticulous searching that ended in the silent void where one woman had vanished without a trace. From late 2009 through the end of 2010, Elena Brooks's file remained on the Dover Police Department's list of missing persons with undetermined causes. After multiple internal reviews and re-examinations of physical evidence, no new data was recorded. Mud, soil, tire tread, and hair samples recovered from the vehicle were all reanalyzed in early 2010. Results showed no foreign DNA. There were no phone calls, financial transactions, or cell signals linked to Elena after the night of October 17, 2009. The Records Division's periodic follow-up reports carried a brief note, "No signs of life activity, continue archiving." In April 2011, the Brooks family moved out of the Willow Creek neighborhood. The house was listed for sale and changed ownership. David Brooks relocated to Tucson, Arizona, where he had relatives working in real estate. After the move, He only communicated with police via email, responding briefly when asked if he had heard anything from his wife. From 2011 through 2018, the Elena Brooks case file received no further updates. Each year, the Delaware State Police Missing Persons Unit sent an automated review notice. The result was always no activity, no evidence. The original investigative team was disbanded, and the officers involved were reassigned to other units. Lieutenant Mason Gray retired in 2015, leaving a final entry in his log: no progress, no evidence. Possibly an undetermined missing person case, or the incident may have crossed state lines. Elena's data was backed up into the Delaware State Police Digital Archive under case number 09DSP 1173, along with more than 200 other unresolved adult missing person cases. The Toyota Camry was released to the family in 2012 under legal procedure once it no longer held investigative value. The remaining small samples were stored in the Kent County Evidence Locker under inactive file. In the state's annual summary reports, the name Elena Brooks appeared briefly in the Unsolved Cases, No Leads section, with the note, last seen in Dover, Delaware, October 2009. After nearly a decade, the case gradually faded from attention and was removed from the active monitoring list. In Delaware, File 09DSP 1173 was classified as cold case, missing adult, and sat untouched in a metal cabinet in Storage Room 3, containing only a few faded reports, and Lieutenant Gray's old maps, the last traces of a search that never reached a conclusion. In March 2019, almost 10 years after Elena Brooks's disappearance was moved to cold case status, the Delaware State Police established a dedicated cold case unit, CCU, under the State Bureau of Criminal Investigation. The new unit consisted of 6 experienced investigators specializing in forensics, legacy data recovery, and digital evidence analysis, tasked with reviewing missing person and unsolved homicide cases older than 10 years. Lieutenant Maria Santos, age 42, formerly of the Wilmington Crime Scene Unit, was appointed team leader. Immediately upon taking command, she requested access to the full list of missing adult, undetermined files in state archives, more than 40 cases dating from the 1990s to 2010. Among them, Case 09DSP 1173 on Elena Brooks stood out because its physical evidence remained intact and still sealed. Soil samples, hair, mud, tire impressions, and crime scene photographs. The 2009 summary report showed the case had been thoroughly investigated at the outset, but stalled due to insufficient biological data. Santos flagged it as priority number 1 for reevaluation, noting physical evidence from the scene is still preserved. 2019 trace DNA technology can now yield results that were impossible in 2009. In the first week, she and the unit's lead technician, Sergeant David Morrow, went to Delaware State Police Storage Room 3 in Dover. They signed out the original file, 8 boxes of documents, and 2 sealed evidence containers, each labeled 09DSP 1173. Brooks, Elena. Inside were numbered soil bags, W01 through W04, mud sample, G04, 2 hairs, H1 and H2, and CDs containing scene photos and vehicle analysis results. Everything remained in good condition, seals intact. Santos checked the logbook and noted the last person to sign the evidence out was Lieutenant Mason Gray in 2010. In addition to the physical items, the administrative file contained 186 pages of reports, witness statements, traffic camera data, and detailed search maps. She ordered the forensics team to create full digital copies of all documents while cross-checking every evidence tag to maintain chain of custody. On March 25, the CCU held its first case meeting at the Wilmington office. Santos presented a summary: female victim, age 37, disappeared the evening of October 17, 2009, after leaving First Baptist Church in Dover. Vehicle, located at Killens Pond State Park, no obvious signs of crime. Case classified undetermined, internal suspicions, never confirmed. She pinned a large Dover map to the board and marked key locations with red pins: the church, the Brooks residence, the Willow Creek vacant lot, and the spot where the car was found. She assigned Sergeant Morrow to re-examine physical evidence, Lieutenant Harold Flynn to review old electronic and cell phone data, and took personal responsibility for reassessing the entire 2009 investigative process. That same day, the forensics team began preliminary testing of the sealed bags. Morrow examined the soil samples under an optical microscope and noted mineral grains with unusual structure. Some contained rare industrial impurities not typically found in natural forest areas, suggesting the material had contacted a man-made environment. A short report was drafted recommending trace analysis to determine origin. Meanwhile, Santos reviewed the original interview transcripts. David Brooks's statement contained clear inconsistencies regarding timeline and route, but at the time, there had been insufficient grounds for charges. She noted, re-examine finances and 2009 bank records. By the end of the month, the CCU completed the initial takeover phase. All paper records were digitized, evidence was resealed under current protocols, and everything was uploaded to the state's new electronic evidence management system. Santos's internal report to the director of the Delaware Bureau of Criminal Investigation stated, "The Elena Brooks case meets all criteria for reactivation: intact biological evidence, complete file, potential suspect, and no prior examination, using modern technology. Request transfer from archive to active investigation status." On April 2, 2019, the request was approved. The Elena Brooks disappearance was officially assigned code CCU Reopened 2019-01, becoming the first case on the Delaware Cold Case Unit's reactivation list, marking the return of a file that had been forgotten for nearly a decade. On April 3, 2019, immediately after the Elena Brooks case was formally reopened, Lieutenant Maria Santos and the Cold Case Unit technicians conducted a full inventory of all related evidence that had been stored for nearly 10 years in Delaware State Police Evidence Vault 3. Under cold white lights, they laid out each sealed bag on a stainless steel table and relabeled them according to the new CCU catalog. There were 14 items in total, divided into 4 main groups: personal items recovered from the vehicle, soil and mud from the recovery site and the Willow Creek vacant lot, fabric scraps from the Killens Pond roadside, and the original 2009 DNA files. Each sealed bag was checked against its code, physical condition, and last handler's signature. Santos documented everything meticulously to ensure an unbroken chain of custody. While examining bag V09, which contained material from the Toyota's trunk, a technician discovered a smaller sealed bag inside that was not listed in the 2009 inventory. It held a white cloth, approximately 15 × 20 centimeters, with faint light brown stains. The label read "Recovered from rear seat floor, not tested." Morrow, the forensics lead, confirmed this item had never been sent for analysis and had likely been overlooked during the initial examination. He immediately assigned it new identifier CCU EBF1 and placed it on the priority list. Continuing the inventory, the team found another sealed bag, T02, containing a gray bath towel recovered from the front passenger area, still dry and carrying a faint bleach odor. Lieutenant Gray's original note simply said, "Textile item, possibly household," with no mention of testing. Santos ordered both items, along with the old soil and mud samples, separated and transferred to the Delaware State Forensic Lab in Wilmington, which had just implemented the new STR mixed trace DNA system in early 2019. The soil samples were re-examined under a scanning electron microscope. Technician Heller noted that W03 contained fine gray-black clay particles, while G04 from beneath the vehicle contained dark red mud mixed with gravel, indicating the car had traveled over at least 2 distinct terrains. Santos concluded, "This degree of difference requires chemical analysis to pinpoint specific origin." That same day, the team reviewed the original 2009 DNA files, consisting of hairs H1 and H2 and 4 trace samples from the steering wheel, gear shift, and door handles. The old report stated there was insufficient DNA for identification because the technology at the time could only amplify a maximum of 16 loci. Santos directed that all samples be resent to the lab for testing using the new 29 loci enhanced amplification and multi-layer STR mix method, capable of recovering DNA profiles from a single skin cell. On April 8, the evidence was packed into specialized transport containers with an 11-page transfer manifest. 4 technicians escorted the shipment to the Wilmington Forensic Lab and handed it over to Lab Director Dr. Karen Lowe, who confirmed receipt and scheduled analysis in 3 phases. First, scanning all textiles for biological traces. Second, comparative soil and mud analysis for geological sourcing. Third, re-extraction of DNA from the old files using STR mix and YSTR methods. While awaiting results, Santos noticed that the 2009 vehicle evidence description only briefly mentioned a gray towel with no detailed photographs. She instructed Morrow to photograph the item in high resolution before transfer. The new images revealed dark fibers on the towel's surface that differed from the original material, possibly hair or animal fur. One corner showed a faint yellowish stain, unclear whether from oxidation or cleaning chemicals. Morrow assessed it was likely used to wipe the vehicle interior. Santos noted, "If the towel yields DNA, we need relative timing of use." Meanwhile, soil bags W01 through W04 were re-weighed. Weights were stable, confirming good storage conditions. All data was entered into the CCU's new Electronic Evidence Management System under identifier EB 2019-01. Santos's internal report, dated April 9, 2019, to the Director of the Delaware Bureau of Criminal Investigation stated, "Completed inventory of Elena Brooks evidence. Total of 14 items, including 2 previously untested items discovered, cloth fragment CCU EBF1 and bath towel CCU EBT1. All samples and original DNA files transferred to the Delaware State Forensic Lab for STR mix testing and trace geological analysis." She signed beneath the conclusion, "Case reactivation has officially entered the intensive forensic phase, full chain of custody maintained. Priorities: identified DNA profiles, soil origin, and connection between items found in the vehicle and the recovery location." At the end of the workday, Santos gathered the files and added a note in her personal log. 10 years have passed, the evidence is still intact, and this may be the first time this disappearance gets a real look through the eyes of modern science. On April 15, 2019, the Delaware State Forensic Laboratory in Wilmington began trace DNA testing on all evidence transferred from the cold case unit. Dr. Karen Lowe personally supervised the analysis, assisted by 2 DNA and toxicology technicians. The primary items were cloth fragment CCU EBF1, gray towel CCU EBT1, and soil samples W01 through W04 plus mud G04. Each item was unsealed in a clean room and separated using sterile gloves to prevent cross-contamination. Fragment F1 was scanned under an electron microscope and UV light. 2 distinct areas appeared, one with faint light brown spots, the other with a yellowish streak along the edge. Under UV, the brown area showed weak fluorescence characteristic of organic material. A small section was cut for STR mixed DNA testing using 29 loci amplification. After 18 hours of processing, results revealed female DNA with a 99.97% match to Elena Brooks's 2009 reference sample taken from her toothbrush in the original file. This was the first direct biological link between the evidence and the victim. The yellowish edge area was sent to toxicology for chemical extraction using methanol solvent and GCMS analysis. The report detected residual zolpidem tartrate, the active ingredient in Ambien sleeping pills, at low but confirmatory levels. Dr. Lowe concluded, "The cloth bears the victim's DNA and traces of Ambien, highly likely from skin contact or sweat of someone who had recently taken the drug. She ordered the same testing on towel T1. Analysis of the towel fibers revealed slowed skin cells at one corner. STR mix results produced an identical genetic profile to F1. This double discovery confirmed both items had direct contemporaneous contact with the victim. Concurrently, soil samples W01 through W04 were sent to the trace geology team. Using energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy (EDX), technicians determined W03 contained kaolinite clay mixed with silica particles and a small amount of cement ash, characteristic of urban residential areas, not natural forest. When compared to G04 taken from under the vehicle, which contained dark red soil and fine gravel, the difference was stark. Lowe cross-referenced the 2009 Delaware State soil map and determined W03 matched the soil composition of the Willow Creek residential neighborhood where the Brooks family lived, not the higher organic content found around Killen's Pond. This finding was considered a major breakthrough. The vehicle and evidence may have contacted soil near the Brooks home before appearing at the park. In the report to the cold case unit, Dr. Lowe wrote, "No physical evidence places the victim at the pond area. Soil, mineral, and dust composition on the items all match the residential zone." Lieutenant Maria Santos received the report on April 22. She convened the team that afternoon and projected the DNA charts and analytical results. The screen clearly displayed two key points: female DNA matching Elena Brooks and Ambien residue on the same items. Morrow read the conclusion. The presence of zolpidem suggests the victim either took the sleeping medication herself or was exposed to it in a confined environment, inconsistent with an outdoor setting. Heller cross-checked the victim's 2009 medical records in the file. No Ambien prescriptions were ever issued. Santos flagged the detail and added to the internal report, "Verify source of Ambien." The soil, cloth, and towel samples were photographed, resealed, and returned to forensic storage. The full 26-page lab report ended with a concise statement. Biological evidence confirms victim contact with Ambien and related items prior to leaving the residential area, no forest or pond environmental indicators. On April 23, Santos forwarded the official report to the director of the Delaware Bureau of Criminal Investigation with a request to expand examination around the Brooks residence. In her personal notebook, she wrote one line, "10 years searching Killen's Pond, but maybe Elena never got there." After receiving forensic confirmation of DNA traces and Ambien residue on the evidence, Lieutenant Maria Santos shifted the investigation toward digital data. She ordered the cold case unit's tech division to recover communication records from the victim's original SIM card, sealed with the 2009 evidence. The Verizon 32K card was stored in a plastic evidence envelope, seal still intact. On April 24, 2019, data technician James Rowe used SIM Recovery Tool 4.1 to extract all remaining data. Recovery took nearly 8 hours due to the obsolete file format. By the end of the day, the system displayed 187 SMS messages and 54 incoming-outgoing calls between September 10 and October 17, 2009. Most matched the original call log, but one deleted fragment file contained 3 previously unrecovered final messages. The first, sent at 8:40 p.m. on October 17. "Left church, should be home soon." The second, at 8:49 p.m. "Driving, roads quiet, see you soon." The third, at 8:56 p.m. "Almost to the neighborhood, I see the streetlights." All 3 were sent to the same number saved as Day, David Brooks's personal cell. Rowe confirmed there was no reply from the recipient. Santos compared the timestamps to traffic camera footage showing Elena's Camry passing the Roosevelt intersection at 8:57 p.m. Perfectly consistent, she was still en route home and had not left the Dover area. Verizon cell tower records were retrieved from legal archives under court order, revealing 3 base stations that registered Elena's phone between 8:40 p.m. and 9 p.m. The final signal pinged Tower 3115, located in the Willow Creek residential area, less than a mile from the Brooks home. The map showed strong signal strength, meaning the phone remained active and close to home before abruptly dropping off. Further system logs revealed an incoming call from Day at 9:32 p.m. that went unanswered, after which the phone powered off completely and never re-registered on the network. Per carrier protocol, when a phone is powered off or the battery removed, the tower drops the connection after 15 minutes. Using this data, Santos calculated if the last message was sent at 8:56 p.m. and the final ping ended at 9:47 p.m. The entire sequence occurred within a radius of less than 5 miles, and the phone never left Tower 3115's coverage zone. She noted in the report, cell tower data confirms the victim's phone remained in the residential area during the disappearance window. No evidence of travel to Killen's Pond. Heller reviewed the SIM's contact list, 26 numbers total, only 3 used regularly: husband, mother, and a fellow church member. No unknown numbers or threatening messages. When Rowe examined metadata, he discovered the final message contained an embedded GPS coordinate automatically added by Verizon's 2009 trial location feature, 39.0867N, -75.5501. W, precisely inside Willow Creek. Santos cross-referenced the 2009 topographic map and confirmed the coordinate fell on a side road, connecting the neighborhood to the vacant lot behind house number 114. This discovery was considered pivotal. Elena had returned almost home before the signal vanished. In the afternoon briefing, Santos presented a timeline chart to the team. It showed 4 markers: 8:40 p.m., left church; 8:49 p.m., en route; 8:56 p.m., nearing neighborhood; 9:47 p.m., signal lost. She offered a preliminary conclusion: nothing indicates the victim ever reached Killen's Pond. Electronic evidence places the phone's final location inside Willow Creek. The messages and tower data were backed up, printed as an 11-page appendix with screenshots of the original files. The official report, signed April 25, 2019, concluded. Final messages confirm Elena Brooks was driving home, last signal located in the Brooks residential area with no extension toward the pond. Data establishes the victim's journey ended near her residence. Santos reread the final line of the minutes and carefully added a handwritten note. 30 minutes of disappearance, no longer a random void, but a precise boundary on a small Dover map. On April 26, 2019, after completing the restoration of communication data and cross-referencing phone signals, Lieutenant Maria Santos directed the cold case unit team to fully reconstruct the entire timeline of Elena Brooks' movements on the evening of October 17, 2009. The meeting was held at the Wilmington office with a topographic map of Dover spread across the wall, accompanied by a cell tower diagram and images extracted from traffic cameras. Santos instructed the team to reorganize all evidence in logical sequence, combining electronic evidence, witness statements, and traffic data. The compiled results clearly revealed 4 main phases in Elena's journey before her disappearance, leaving First Baptist Church at 8:45 p.m. A brief stop at the Royal Farms gas station, appearing on the Roosevelt intersection camera at 8:57 p.m. and the final phone signal recorded in the Willow Creek residential area around 9:47 p.m. Based on the distances between these points, the vehicle traveled normally at an average speed of 35 miles per hour, with no signs of looping back or turning toward the Killen's Pond area. The technical team confirmed that the church camera captured Elena leaving the parking lot and driving south. 6 minutes later, the Royal Farms gas station camera system recorded the headlights of a silver-colored vehicle stopping for 52 seconds, though the person inside was not visible due to the low camera angle. Payment card data showed no transactions, indicating she did not enter the store and likely only stopped to check her phone or belongings. 7 minutes after that, the Camry passed through the Roosevelt intersection, matching the text message almost to the neighborhood, I see the streetlights. From that location to the Brooks home was only a 3-minute drive, but instead of heading straight home, phone signals showed she remained in the area for nearly 30 more minutes before the phone went dead. Santos ordered a detailed chart with the horizontal axis representing time and the vertical axis representing geographic location. The solid red line showed the primary travel route, while the dotted black line indicated the final signal area. When GPS data from text messages and cell tower records were overlaid, the location matched the coordinates 39.0867N, 75.5501. Located directly on a side road behind the Willow Creek neighborhood, where tire tracks consistent with Elena's vehicle had previously been found. Morrow read the calculation results. From the time she left the church until the signal was lost, the total duration was 62 minutes. The necessary travel time for this route was only 15 minutes. The remaining unexplained gap is 47 minutes. Gray had previously assumed in old records that Elena might have had an accident on the road, but with this data, Santos concluded that everything happened within the residential area, not in the forest or park. Heller projected a series of satellite images comparing the Brooks home location with the side road. The distance between the 2 points was just over 400 meters, close enough for the phone signal to still fall within the coverage area of Tower 3115. He pointed to the map and said, "If she turned off her phone here, the device would still report this location before fully disconnecting." Santos nodded and directed the team to create a 3D simulation model of the journey based on 2009 movement data, lighting conditions, and terrain. The simulation results showed Elena left the church after dark, drove through a sparsely populated stretch of road, made a brief stop at the gas station, then arrived in Willow Creek around 9 p.m. and stopped the car in an empty lot behind houses 112, 118. Matching the location where police had found tire tracks that year. The car may then have been moved from that spot in the following hours, leading to its discovery at Killen's Pond 2 days later. All evidence pointed to the assumption that Elena never left the residential neighborhood at the time of her disappearance. Santos concluded the journey ended in Willow Creek. At around 9 p.m., she was still inside the neighborhood. From that point onward, there is no evidence she ever left Dover. She ordered the preparation of a timeline reconstruction report, including detailed time charts, positioning maps, and a 3D journey simulation. The 18-page report was completed on April 27, 2019, concluding, "Victim's movement sequence confirmed, left First Baptist Church at 2045, stopped at Royal Farms gas station at 2050. Appeared at Roosevelt intersection at 2057, final phone signal in Willow Creek residential area at 2147. Hypothesis: victim disappeared within the neighborhood. No data confirms travel to Killen's Pond." Santos signed beneath the conclusion and added a note in her duty log. For the first time in 10 years, Elena Brooks' journey has been fully reconstructed, and the final point lies right in the neighborhood she once called home. On April 30, 2019, after completing the journey reconstruction report and determining Elena Brooks' final location was within the Willow Creek residential area, Lieutenant Maria Santos drafted a request for a search warrant for the former Brooks family home, now under new ownership. The application was submitted to Kent County Court with full supporting evidence, including DNA analysis results, cell tower data, and the timeline map. In the affidavit to the court, she stated clearly, "Location data confirms the victim's phone lost signal within a radius of less than 1 mile around the residence. Newly discovered physical evidence contains DNA and ambient traces matching soil from the property. There is reasonable basis to believe critical evidence still remains at the original scene." After 48 hours of review, on May 2, 2019, Judge Michael Harris signed search warrant number 19-042, authorizing the cold case unit and forensic team to examine the entire house, basement, and rear yard at 118 Willow Creek for a period not exceeding 7 days. The warrant was simultaneously sent to the current owner, Karen Doyle, who had purchased the home in 2013. She agreed to cooperate and was willing to vacate the property while the investigation team worked. On the morning of May 4th, the forensic van and 3 technical units arrived at the scene. The 2-story beige house, typical suburban Dover architecture, retained its original structure with only minor repairs. Santos and technician David Morrow conducted the initial survey. The basement was located beneath the kitchen floor, accessed via a white-painted wooden door. When opened, a heavy smell of dampness and old dust rose up. Lighting was set along the stairs, and brick walls were scanned section by section with thermal sensors and ground-penetrating radar (GPR) to detect voids. About 15 minutes later, the screen displayed an anomaly in the southwest corner of the basement, where the concrete floor thickness was uneven. Morrow probed with a steel rod and discovered a hollow section approximately 40 centimeters deep. He marked it with red spray paint and reported to Santos to request a supplemental excavation warrant. After telephone approval from the court, the technical team began lightly drilling the concrete layer. At approximately 5:20 p.m., they uncovered a thin plastic sheet beneath the concrete containing a hard object. Police sealed the area and established a chain of custody log. The plastic bag was recovered intact, sealed with old tape and covered in dried mud on the outside. Upon opening, it contained a gray bath towel similar to the one recovered from the car, along with numerous small bone fragments mixed with dried mud and textile fibers. A bone fragment, approximately 3 centimeters long, shaped like a human finger phalanx, was placed separately in an evidence bag. Additionally, numerous brownish-red stains on the plastic surface were sampled on-site and tested with a Kastle-Meyer reagent, yielding a positive reaction for human blood. Santos immediately called the state prosecutor's office to report the discovery of new biological evidence at the victim's former residence. Adjacent to the basement, the survey team expanded to the rear yard, where an old shed had once stood, now only a concrete foundation. When scanned with GPR, the equipment showed 2 strong reflection points about 1 meter apart at a depth of 60 centimeters. Police dug carefully with small shovels following the signal guidance and uncovered additional plastic fragments, cloth scraps, and a partially decomposed second plastic bag. All materials were collected, labeled E01 through E06, and placed in specialized containers. By 7 p.m., excavation was complete, the area was sealed, and crime scene, "Do not enter" signs were posted. A 14-page scene report was prepared that night. Preliminary findings stated, discovery of plastic bag containing human blood stains, small bone fragments, old bath towel and textile material in the southwest basement area of 118 Willow Creek. All evidence collected, sealed, and transferred to the Delaware Forensic Lab for analysis. As night fell, forensic vehicle floodlights still illuminated the empty basement floor. Santos stood quietly making notes in her log and wrote the final line of the day. 10 years later, the house floor still kept its secret. The evidence has finally spoken. On May 6, 2019, all evidence recovered from the basement of 118 Willow Creek was transferred to the Delaware State Forensic Laboratory in Wilmington for biological examination. Under the supervision of Dr. Karen Lowe, the forensic team unsealed bag E01 containing the small bone fragment found inside the plastic. The sample was cleaned with phosphate buffer solution, then subjected to DNA extraction using a specialized old bone amplification protocol. After 2 days of processing, STR results showed 29 genetic loci matching perfectly with Elena Brooks' 2009 reference DNA profile, with a probability of random match of 1 in 1.2 billion. The report concluded, bone sample E01 contains DNA matching Elena Brooks' biological profile. Sample confirmed to belong to the victim. This finding was immediately forwarded to the cold case unit. Lieutenant Maria Santos received the report on the afternoon of May 8 and convened an emergency team meeting. She ordered additional analysis of the blood stains on the plastic bag and towel recovered from the basement to determine timing and connection. Test results showed the blood DNA matched the bone sample, confirming the same biological origin. Morrow reviewed the data and concluded, "This eliminates the hypothesis that evidence was moved after the victim disappeared. The evidence indicates the act occurred at the residence." Concurrent with DNA analysis, the toxicology team conducted chemical testing on the plastic fragments and dried mud inside the bag. Using methanol extraction and gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, GCMS, they detected traces of zolpidem tartrate, the active ingredient in Ambien, at a concentration of 0.16 micrograms per gram. This was the same compound previously found on fabric fragment F1 and towel T1. Dr. Lowe compared chemical profiles and confirmed 100% similarity, indicating a high probability that all evidence was exposed to a single Ambien source. When cross-referencing 2009 medical records, no Ambien prescription existed for Elena. Santos ordered a re-examination of David Brooks's tax documents and professional licenses, as he had worked in nutrition consulting and dietary supplement distribution. Delaware Department of Health records confirmed David had collaborated with a private Dover clinic in 2008. 2009, where the attending physician was authorized to prescribe zolpidem. Morrow located an old database list showing David had received sample Ambien orders for sleep research purposes for clients 2 months before Elena's disappearance. Combining the evidence, Santos concluded in an internal report, Ambien source identified as originating from a facility David Brooks collaborated with, no evidence the victim used the drug by prescription, high likelihood of non-consensual exposure. She requested further comparison of bone decomposition and surrounding soil to estimate relative time of death. The forensic team used carbon isotope and nitrogen ratio analysis on the bone sample, yielding an estimated burial time of 8 to 10 years, matching the 2009 disappearance time frame. Bone mineralization and soil analysis showed low decomposition, indicating a dry, airtight environment typical of a concrete basement floor. This refuted the hypothesis that the body had been moved elsewhere. In the May 10, 2019 report, Dr. Lowe concluded, biological and mineralogical evidence proves the victim died and was stored at the former residence for an extended period. No evidence of relocation to the Killens Pond area. Santos received the report, read every line carefully and noted, death occurred at the home, not in the woods. Soil, DNA, Ambien, all point to a single location. She directed the technical team to compile the full chain of evidence for submission to the state prosecutor's office. The 27-page comprehensive report, signed May 12, 2019, stated, DNA confirms bone sample matches Elena Brooks, blood and evidence share the same source. Ambien traces match the drug David Brooks had access to. Time of death corresponds to disappearance period. Conclusion, victim died on site, not at the pond. Sufficient grounds to suspect intentional homicide and evidence concealment. In her personal notebook, Santos wrote at the bottom of the page, 10 years have passed, yet the traces remain. The answer was never under the pond, but right beneath the floor. After the forensic report confirmed the bone DNA matched Elena Brooks, and that the victim died at her own residence, Lieutenant Maria Santos shifted the investigation toward financial aspects to uncover signs of preparation or crime concealment. On May 14, 2019, she formally requested transaction history for David Brooks from Delaware First Bank and the State Tax Authority for the period August to December 2009. 3 days later, electronic records were delivered, including personal account statements, credit card records, and the small business account, Brooks Nutrition Consulting. The statements showed that on October 10, 2009, 1 week before Elena disappeared, David withdrew $4,800 in cash at the Dover main branch. On October 13, he spent $612 at Home Depot, listed as cleaning supplies and cement mix. On October 16, a $250 transaction appeared at a U-Haul rental facility on Route 13 for a small box truck rented for 24 hours. After October 18, there were no further large transactions beyond routine living expenses. Santos reviewed the data, cross-referenced it with the disappearance timeline, and noted unusual spending pattern in the 7 days preceding the incident. She tasked technician Heller with verifying each transaction detail. Heller contacted Home Depot Dover. Although the store used an old system, the receipt was located in digital archives. Invoice number 145792, dated October 13, 2009, listed 3 gallons of concentrated chlorine bleach, 2 bags of quick-rate fast-setting cement, 1 large roll of plastic sheeting, 1 roll of industrial silver duct tape, and 1 pair of rubber gloves. Every item matched materials later discovered in the Brooks basement 10 years later. Heller requested store camera footage, but 2009 recordings had been deleted. However, the transaction log confirmed payment with a Visa card in David Brooks' name with a signature matching bank records. Next, the team verified the U-Haul rental. Company records retained the original paper contract in David Brooks' name, Delaware driver's license B, 77,120, signed receipt at 8:45 a.m. on October 16, 2009, and return at 11:10 a.m. on October 17, just hours before Elena's final choir practice. Odometer mileage showed 18 miles, matching the round-trip distance between the Brooks home and Killen's Pond. The U-Haul employee, when interviewed, vaguely recalled the customer that day, wearing gloves and having a strong chemical smell. The statement was recorded and added to the file. Santos assessed receipts and truck route align with the time frame and materials usable for cleanup, pouring concrete, or transport. She ordered a check of David's online purchases during the same period. Results showed he ordered 2 bottles of industrial odor eliminator from Clean.com on October 14, delivered to the home address. Forensic specialist Morrow compared product codes and confirmed it contained sodium hypochlorite, a strong oxidizer matching faint reactions detected in the basement concrete samples during excavation. When all data was combined, a 15-page financial report was prepared, concluding, in the 7 days before the disappearance, the suspect withdrew a large cash amount, purchased cleaning chemicals and cement, and rented a box truck. No reasonable explanation provided for use. Santos reviewed the detailed table and noted that after October 18, there were no significant transactions, and the credit card was temporarily frozen on October 20. 3 days after Elena disappeared, citing lost card, she wrote in the report, spending pattern indicates preparation, execution, and cleanup within the same crime time frame. Reviewing Lieutenant Gray's 2009 report, the financial section only briefly noted no abnormalities because accessing bank data then required a separate warrant and the case lacked sufficient criminal grounds at the time. With the 2019 updated retrieval system, the CCU could access complete detailed transaction history. Santos added a commentary section, purchase of cement and plastic sheeting 4 days before the disappearance, combined with truck rental 1 day prior, demonstrates premeditation. On May 20, she signed the report for submission to the Delaware State Prosecutor's Office. The comprehensive summary's conclusion stated, Home Depot and U-Haul receipts, verified as authentic. Purchased materials match substances recovered at the 2019 scene. Transactions reveal calculated spending timed precisely with the period before Elena Brooks disappeared. Financial evidence strengthens the determination of criminal conduct. At the bottom of the last page, Santos wrote by hand, money, chemicals, and the truck. 3 ordinary things in Elena's final week. Now 3 pieces that reshaped the entire case. On May 22, 2019, after completing the reconciliation of David Brooks's financial transactions and verifying the unusual spending chain prior to the disappearance, Lieutenant Maria Santos directed the next step, re-interviewing all 12 original witnesses listed in the 2009 case file to validate their statements using new technology and data. 2 witnesses were flagged as critical, the Royal Farms gas station attendant, where Elena had briefly stopped, and the Home Depot Dover employee at the chemical aisle. On the morning of May 23, Santos and Heller visited the Royal Farms station on Route 13, about 3 miles south of First Baptist Church. The security system had been upgraded, but the current manager confirmed that a longtime employee, Raymond Ellis, who had been the shift supervisor in 2009, was still there. When interviewed, Ellis said he clearly remembered the night of October 17th because it was lightly raining and only 3 customers came in between 8:45 p.m. and 9 p.m. He described a silver Toyota Camry pulling up to Pump 2. The driver was a petite woman with brown hair, and a man wearing a dark baseball cap was in the passenger seat. Ellis added, "I remember her saying something, but I couldn't make it out. The guy paid cash, about $20, then they left." The car turned back toward the Willow Creek area. When Heller showed him an old photo of Elena Brooks, Ellis confirmed, "That's definitely the woman, but I didn't know her name at the time." Santos pressed for the exact time. Ellis said the store clock read 8:55 p.m., which matched the timestamp of the Roosevelt intersection camera capturing the vehicle passing through. This new statement directly contradicted David Brooks's 2009 claim that he never saw his wife on the evening she vanished. The interview was recorded and logged under code RC-19. That same afternoon, Santos and Heller went to the Home Depot in Dover, where David had purchased supplies on October 13th according to bank records. Despite the 10-year gap, employee records still listed the shift manager/cashier from that day, Melissa Grant, now working at another branch in the city. When contacted, Grant agreed to meet at the Wilmington Police Department on May 24th. During the interview, she confirmed she had rung up a customer named David Brooks and described him as around 40, about 6 feet tall, dark brown hair, wearing a polo shirt with a nutrition company logo. He asked for the strongest concrete cleaner we had to clean a concrete floor and wanted to know which cement dried fastest, within 2 hours. I remember because the questions were odd. Grant also recalled the customer paid with a Visa card and carried 2 bags of cement himself to a small rental truck parked outside. Santos showed her a copy of the October 13th receipt. Grant confirmed it was her signature on the cashier line. When asked about the customer's demeanor, she said, "He seemed in a hurry, was sweating a lot, and kept looking around like he was worried someone was watching him." Grant's statement perfectly matched the receipt and the U-Haul rental data. Santos immediately added both interviews to case file CCU-EB 2019, under the section Re-Verified Original Witnesses. On May 25th, the team held a full evidence review meeting. Heller projected a map marking the 2 locations, Royal Farms and Home Depot, both directly tied to David in the week before the disappearance. The timeline showed Elena and David together at the gas station on the evening of October 17th, then the car heading home, aligning with Elena's last cell phone ping and the unexplained 30-minute gap. Meanwhile, the chemical and cement purchase 4 days earlier indicated preparation. Santos noted, "Witness Ellis confirms Elena and David were together, proving the suspect's presence at the critical time. Witness Grant confirms the purchase of cleaning agents and quick-drying cement. The 2 independent statements corroborate each other." She ordered a re-examination of David's 2009 statement for comparison. In the old report he had claimed he stayed home all evening watching television and never went out. The distance between the house and Royal Farms was just over a mile, easily drivable. Santos added a final note to the summary report. 10-year-old witness statements, re-verified, consistently placed David Brooks with Elena on the night she vanished and show prior purchase of cleaning supplies. Witness evidence strengthens the existing financial and forensic chains, establishing preparation and presence at the scene. The 19-page report was sent to the Delaware Attorney General's office on the morning of May 26, 2019, marking the completion of the original witness recanvass phase. In her duty log, Santos wrote briefly, "2 ordinary people remembered a rainy night from 10 years ago, and those belated recollections may change the entire direction of the investigation." On May 28, 2019, after gathering the new witness statements and the financial forensic evidence that solidified suspicion, Lieutenant Maria Santos sent formal correspondence to the Delaware Attorney General, requesting coordination with the Federal Bureau of Investigation to place David Brooks, now living in Tucson, Arizona, under surveillance. Civil records showed David was running a small supplement distribution company and still held a nutrition consulting license. The surveillance order was approved on June 3, 2019, and assigned to the FBI Phoenix Field Office for execution. The surveillance team, led by Senior Special Agent John Kincaid, began offline monitoring that included video recording, tracking movements, and periodic collection of household trash for biological tracing. Initial reports showed David lived alone in a North Tucson suburb, had little contact with neighbors, left early in the morning, and returned in the late afternoon. The first 3 weeks revealed nothing unusual beyond regular visits to a gym and a local chemical supply store. On June 18, Agent Kincaid observed David leave his house at 10 p.m. carrying 2 large trash bags and deposit them in a public dumpster several blocks away, rather than using his own curbside bin. The behavior was flagged as unusual and possibly intended to evade official collection. The surveillance team retrieved the bags after he left, sealed them, and sent them to the FBI lab in Phoenix. Inside were personal items, plastic bottles, shredded papers, and tissues. A used disposable razor was separated for biological sampling. Hair and skin cells recovered from the blade were processed using STR-mixed DNA analysis. The June 22 report confirmed a full match with the DNA profile of David Brooks from the 2008 identification records. The sample was immediately forwarded to the Delaware Forensic Lab for comparison with crime scene evidence. On June 26, Dr. Karen Lowe completed the comparison. The YSTR profile from the razor matched 100% the male DNA recovered from the inside of the buried plastic bag and the surface of the bloody towel. The random match probability was calculated at 1 in 5.8 million. The report concluded, male DNA source in evidence items matches David Brooks. Santos received the results on the morning of June 27 and immediately convened an emergency video conference with FBI Phoenix and the Delaware Attorney General's office. She presented the chain of DNA, financial, and witness evidence, and stated this was the first direct link between the suspect and the crime scene. In subsequent surveillance, Agent Kincaid noted David began altering routines, keeping windows closed, no longer using his curbside trash, limiting outings, and repeatedly driving north into the desert at night. The team attached a GPS tracker to the undercarriage of his pickup. Data showed the trips lasted only a few hours with no fixed destination, likely counter-surveillance drives. On June 30, the FBI collected more trash from the public dumpster David had begun using. This time, it contained a pair of rubber gloves, a paper cup with dried liquid residue, and 2 Ambien blister packs. Rapid DNA testing of saliva on the cup rim again matched the previous razor sample. A preliminary report sent to Delaware on July 3 confirmed consistent non-random DNA linkage between suspect and crime scene biological evidence. Santos reviewed the report and added to case file CCU, EB, 2019. Direct biological link between suspect and evidence established. Prepare arrest warrant package. In her personal duty notebook, she wrote one additional line. After 10 years, the DNA has spoken. There is no longer any doubt that the hands that once buried secrets beneath a Delaware basement floor are still leaving traces in Arizona trash. On July 5, 2019, once DNA analysis conclusively tied the biological evidence to David Brooks, the Delaware Attorney General's office, in coordination with FBI Phoenix, conducted a formal interview at the Tucson field office. Lieutenant Maria Santos flew overnight from Wilmington to Arizona, bringing copies of case file CCU, EB, 2019, and the confirmed DNA reports. The interview took place in a secure room, fully audio and video recorded. Present were Santos, Special Agent John Kincaid, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Mendez, and suspect David Brooks. After being advised of his rights and the purpose of the interview, David remained calm, sat upright, and showed no overt reaction. Santos began with basic questions. "Do you remember the evening of October 17, 2009? David answered curtly. "Yes, I was home watching TV." When asked if he had met Elena at the Royal Farm Station, he gave a tired smile. "No, I don't know where she was." Santos showed him stills from the security footage and Raymond Ellis's statement. David was silent for several seconds, then said, "That could be anyone." When presented with the DNA results, placing his genetic material inside the buried plastic bag, David continued to deny, "I never buried anything. I sold the house. Whatever happened after that has nothing to do with me." His voice stayed even and emotionless, but Kincaid noted a slight tremor in David's right hand when the bloody towel was mentioned. Prosecutor Mendez asked directly, "Are you familiar with Ambien?" David nodded and said it was a sleep aid he had once recommended to patients in nutrition studies, but insisted he never brought it home. When shown the toxicology report, David began repeating the phrase, "It's all a test, I have been forgiven." Santos observed that he frequently deflected with religious language. "God has a plan for every soul. Death is not the end. No one is lost who has been chosen." The transcript notes describe a low, steady voice, sometimes pausing as if reciting scripture. Over the 3-hour session, David admitted no wrongdoing. When Santos mentioned the human remains found beneath the old basement floor, he simply closed his eyes and whispered, "The earth will give back everything, but not to you." This spontaneous statement was flagged in the report under religious deflection. Agent Kincaid shifted to a psychological approach, asking about his marriage to Elena. David said they no longer shared the same faith and that Elena had gone too far with her own beliefs. Asked about conflicts in the week before her disappearance, he replied, "Everyone has arguments, but I loved her. I did nothing wrong." When confronted with the Home Depot receipt, he suggested someone might have used my card, despite the signature matching perfectly. Regarding the U-Haul rental, he first said he didn't remember, then claimed he probably rented it for a friend. His story changed 3 times in 5 minutes, prompting the prosecutor to note inconsistency on the record. At the end, when Santos informed him that the male DNA on the evidence matched him absolutely, David looked directly into the camera and said, "If she is really there, then it was God's will. I cannot change what has been ordained." That statement was highlighted in the file as spontaneous utterance, direct reference to victim death. After more than 4 hours the interview concluded, David was released under continued surveillance, pending charging decisions. The 23-page interview summary stated, "Subject uncooperative, denied all allegations. Limited emotional response, calm demeanor, frequent use of religious and fatalistic language. Stress indicators increased when plastic bag, towel and bone evidence were mentioned. No confession, but verbal and nonverbal responses indicate cognitive involvement in the incident." Lieutenant Maria Santos signed the conclusion and added by hand, "No confession was needed, his silence already carries the full resonance of guilt." On July 9, 2019, only 4 days after the formal interview, the cold case unit received an unexpected call from Arizona. The caller was Karen Brooks, David's current wife, married to him since 2013. Her voice shook as she said she wanted to turn over a device that may be important to the investigation. On July 10, arranged by FBI Phoenix, Santos and Agent Kincaid met Karen at the Tucson field office. She brought a dusty old Dell Inspiron laptop, explaining she had found it in David's storage closet while cleaning. Karen said, "I didn't even know if it still worked, but there were files named Elena. When I opened them, something felt wrong. The writing didn't sound like a woman." She signed the evidence transfer form and consented to full forensic examination of the device. The laptop was sealed and shipped to the Delaware Digital Forensics Lab. Technician James Rowe used in-case forensic software to image the drive. The most recent file modifications were dated December 2009, 3 months after Elena was reported missing. In the personal files folder were 8 Word documents titled Elena_Journal_2009, written in the style of a personal diary. A preliminary review revealed passages describing depression and suicidal ideation. However, metadata analysis showed every file was created under the user account d.brooks from the IP address registered to David's home at that time. Font, margins, and formatting matched David's known business documents. Author information embedded in the files defaulted to David B. linked to his company Microsoft Office license. The 17-page digital forensic report concluded, files titled as Elena's journal were not created by the victim, but by the user of David Brooks's computer after the date of disappearance. To reinforce the finding, Santos requested FBI forensic linguist Dr. Anna Patel compare the writing style with authenticated handwritten letters from Elena in the 2009 file. Patel found stark differences. The fake journals used male sentence structure, technical phrasing, and repeated themes of guilt and redemption, inconsistent with Elena's emotional language and grammar. Her report stated, greater than 95% probability the text was authored by someone other than the victim. 3 of the 8 files contain passages about what was revealed in a dream. I will depart peacefully so no one is held responsible. The phrasing closely mirrored a quote David had given police in 2009 to support the theory that Elena took her own life. Santos ordered Rowe to check print history. The journals had been printed once on January 5, 2010, from David's personal printer, during the period he was voluntarily providing documents to investigators. Once the report was finalized, Santos added a new section to CCU EB 2019, titled Fabricated Documentary Evidence. The summary read, Dell Inspiron laptop recovered from suspect's residence contains 8 fabricated journal files under Elena Brooks's name. Metadata and linguistic analysis prove the documents were created and edited by David Brooks. Content was crafted to portray the victim as suicidal, consistent with the suspect's original 2009 defense narrative. Evidence demonstrates document forgery intended to mislead the investigation. At the July 13 briefing with prosecutor Rachel Mendez and Agent Kincaid, Santos presented the findings and said, we no longer have only DNA and physical evidence, we now have proof of an active attempt to construct an alternate story, a woman who chose to leave. Mendez nodded and called it the turning point that establishes intent. Before the meeting ended, Santos wrote in her log, an old computer forgotten in a closet for 10 years finally told the true story, not about the victim, but about the hand that wrote her words for her. On July 16, 2019, while the cold case unit was incorporating the fabricated journal evidence from David Brooks's old laptop, a new figure emerged that opened a psychological and religious dimension to the case. The individual was Samuel Carter, 52. A former college classmate and early 2000s business partner of David in the nutrition field. He contacted the Delaware tip line directly, saying he had thought about it for a long time and could no longer stay silent. The next day, Santos and Agent Kincaid took his formal statement at the FBI Phoenix office. Samuel stated that in the fall of 2009, a few weeks before Elena vanished, he met David at a small conference in Tempe. During a private conversation, David appeared agitated and said Elena no longer understood God's will and needed to be saved from earthly suffering. According to Samuel, David's tone was not metaphorical but extreme, as if he believed death itself was salvation. Samuel clearly recalled David saying, I will help her be saved, exactly as I have been instructed. When Samuel asked who had instructed him, David replied only, the one above. The statement chilled Samuel at the time, but he thought his friend was simply distraught. After Elena's disappearance, he had suspicions but no proof. When he saw news of the 2019 reinvestigation, he decided to come forward. Agent Kincaid asked if he had any tangible evidence of the conversation. Samuel paused, then pulled a USB drive from his pocket and said, I recorded it back then to protect myself. He talked about helping her cross over. Santos immediately logged the drive as evidence. The 14-minute audio file, recorded at a Tempe coffee shop on October 2, 2009, captured a male voice identified as David Brooks. In the recording, David's voice is calm and low, occasionally punctuated by short laughs, and includes the clear statements, She's afraid, but God will receive her. I'm only helping her get there faster to be saved. It is my mission. FBI audio forensics confirmed no signs of editing or splicing. Voice print comparison with David's July 5 interview recording showed a 98% spectral match, rendering the file legally admissible. The audio report noted, primary voice in recording is David Brooks, no manipulation detected, quality sufficient for courtroom evidence. Samuel signed a voluntary disclosure form, declining reward or witness protection. Santos backed up the file and sealed the original USB under code CCU-EB-R1. The supplemental report sent to the Delaware Attorney General on July 18 concluded, witness Samuel Carter's statement and the authenticated recording demonstrate premeditation and express intent to cause the victim's death. The phrase "help her be saved" establishes extremist religious ideology as a direct motive. At the case review, prosecutor Rachel Mendez declared, "We now have DNA, finances, witnesses, and motive. The picture is complete." Santos simply nodded and wrote in her notebook. One sentence spoken 10 years ago, preserved on a tiny USB drive, has finally brought the voice of the past back, louder and clearer than any confession could ever be. On July 20, 2019, after completing the collection and verification of the audio recording and witness statement from Samuel Carter, the Cold Case Unit entered the phase of compiling the entire case file to apply for an official arrest warrant for David Brooks. Lieutenant Maria Santos chaired the meeting at the Wilmington office, attended by Prosecutor Rachel Mendez, a representative from the Delaware Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, FBI Phoenix, and key forensic investigators. Each piece of evidence was presented in order: DNA matches between David and samples recovered from the plastic bag, bath towel, and Elena's bones, receipts for the purchase of chemicals, cement, and gloves. The truck rental transaction immediately before the night of the disappearance, witness statements from the gas station and Home Depot phone data, text messages, and cell tower records confirming Elena never left the residential area. The fabricated journal entries on the Dell Inspiron computer, and the audio recording of Samuel Carter, in which the suspect clearly stated his intent to help her be saved. Everything was arranged into a logical timeline demonstrating preparation, execution, concealment, and misdirection of the investigation. The 87-page comprehensive report, compiled by Santos, opened with the heading, "Re-investigation of the disappearance of Elena Brooks, conclusive evidence of intentional homicide." In the conclusion, she wrote, "Biological, digital, financial, and independent witness evidence all point to the same individual. There is sufficient basis to conclude that suspect David Brooks was directly involved in the death of Elena Brooks at the former residence, 118 Willow Creek, Dover, Delaware." On July 22, the file was forwarded to the Delaware Attorney General's office. Chief Prosecutor William Donnelly reviewed it over 2 full days, together with his legal team scrutinizing every link in the chain of evidence to ensure the legality of each collection step. The FBI report confirmed the DNA was obtained through proper procedure with no privacy violations. The recording was provided voluntarily and verified as authentic. All physical evidence was preserved according to federal standards. On the afternoon of July 24, Donnelly signed document 19 CR 217, requesting the Kent County Court to approve an arrest warrant for suspect David Brooks on charges of first-degree murder, falsifying documents, and obstruction of justice. The court conducted an emergency review that night, and Judge Michael Harris, the same judge who had signed the earlier search warrant, granted the request. The arrest warrant was issued at 9:40 p.m. and transmitted to FBI Phoenix for coordinated execution. The official notice stated, based on DNA evidence, witness testimony, financial records, and digital documents proving intentional homicide, an arrest warrant has been issued for David Brooks, male, born 1971, residing in Tucson, Arizona, pursuant to Title 11, Section 25.01 of the Delaware Criminal Code. Santos received confirmation via email while in her office. She read it silently, closed the file, and said to the team, 10 years, 7 months, and 12 days, we can finally call this a murder. That night, The CCU completed all interagency coordination procedures and transmitted full copies of the file through the secure interagency system in preparation for the arrest the following morning. In her handwritten work log, Santos noted in the margin, "The evidence has converged. There is no longer room for sophistry." On August 9, 2019, after more than 3 months of coordinated investigation, a federal arrest warrant was signed by Judge Michael Harris of the Kent County Court, Delaware, based on the chain of evidence, including DNA, financial records, witness statements, and authenticated voice recording. The warrant, numbered 19, Co. 142, authorized the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Delaware State Police to jointly arrest David Brooks at his residence in Tucson, Arizona, on charges of first-degree murder and evidence tampering. Early on the morning of August 12, the operation, led by Special Agent John Kincaid, was executed. At 5:45 a.m., 4 FBI SUVs surrounded the single-story house in northern suburban Tucson. David was found in the kitchen, wearing a bathrobe, and offered no resistance when agents ordered him outside. He was handcuffed, read his Miranda rights, and informed of the Delaware arrest warrant. During the accompanying search, agents seized multiple items of evidence: 2 prescription bottles of Ambien, 10 milligrams from a local pharmacy, a gray bath towel with stains, printed copies of Elena's fabricated journal files, matching the format of those found on the Dell Inspira, and an external hard drive containing backups of the same files stored under the folder name Faith Project. All items were sealed on site under FBI case number AZ-2197, signed by 2 local witnesses and the lead agent. In the bedroom, officers also located a small plastic container holding numerous dietary supplements and unmarked white tablets. Field testing revealed the active ingredient was zolpidem tartrate, identical to Ambien. David offered no explanation for their origin, saying only, "I kept them for research. I've done nothing illegal." The statement was recorded in the report. After the search concluded, he was removed from the property at 7:10 a.m., head bowed, hands cuffed. To local media cameras, he said only, "I have prayed long enough. Now it is time for God to judge." As the convoy departed Tucson, Santos, who had flown in to oversee the operation, stood on the porch watching and wrote in her notebook. 10 years later, the man who once stood silent before the cameras that morning stepped out into the same early light, this time unable to hide. All evidence was transported with the suspect to Delaware on an FBI-chartered flight, landing at Dover Air Force Base that evening. David was transferred to the Kent County Correctional Facility in stable health with no injuries. The 22-page handover report listed the seized items: 2 sealed Ambien prescription bottles, 2 printed copies of 8 fabricated journal files, 3 bath towel containing DNA matching the victim, 4 external hard drive with document backups, 5 container of unmarked tablets, all sealed and labeled D, EV, 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 2019. On August 13, the Delaware State Police held a brief press conference at their Wilmington headquarters confirming the arrest of the prime suspect in the 2009 disappearance of Elena Brooks. Lieutenant Maria Santos read the official statement. "We believe justice for Elena Brooks has begun to be served. Scientific evidence, technology, and perseverance have brought the truth back to light." The final report of the day noted, "Suspect David Brooks arrested in Tucson, Arizona. Seized Ambien medication, fabricated journals, towel containing victim DNA. Safely extradited to Delaware pending trial." In a personal note, Santos wrote, "When the handcuffs clicked shut, 10 years of silence in this case closed with them. No one escapes the traces they themselves leave behind." On August 15, 2019, after David Brooks was extradited to Delaware, the state prosecutor's office initiated the preliminary trial preparation phase. Chief Prosecutor Rachel Mendez led the legal team, working closely with Lieutenant Maria Santos' cold case unit to finalize the indictment file. Over the following 3 weeks, more than 30 technicians, forensic experts, and investigators reviewed every sample, recording, digital file and witness statement. The completed file totaled 300 pages of forensic evidence, including detailed DNA reports, ambient toxicology results, soil mineral analysis, financial receipts, excavation reports, and all electronic documents recovered from David's computer. The core evidence was structured in 3 layers. First, biological evidence, victim and suspect DNA matched on the same items. Second, digital evidence, journal files, fabricated by David to conceal motive. Third, physical evidence, chemicals, towel, plastic bag, and cement from the Brooks basement, perfectly matching materials purchased at Home Depot in 2009. Mendez and Santos jointly drafted a 48-page indictment charging first-degree murder with premeditation, concealment of evidence, and criminal document falsification. Meanwhile, defense counsel Thomas Kellerman immediately countered that without a complete body, the cause of death could not be determined, arguing the case lacked the elements required for murder. He filed a motion to suppress portions of the DNA evidence due to possible degradation of biological material over time that could lead to errors. The Delaware Office of the Chief Medical Examiner responded with a supplemental report affirming STR mix results were reliable to over 99.99% with no cross-contamination. Mendez requested a pre-trial hearing for the judge to rule on the evidence chain's validity. At the preliminary hearing on September 4, 2019, she presented the case overview, citing the decade-long investigation supported by physical, technical, and witness evidence. The court accepted the entire prosecution file and denied the defense motion to exclude evidence. Following the hearing, local media unanimously reported the case as the largest cold case in Delaware history reopened through DNA technology. While in Kent County detention, David Brooks remained calm, refused media contact, and issued a statement through his attorney, "I am innocent. I believe the truth will come to light." Attorney Kellerman prepared a strategy centered on the incomplete remains argument, asserting it was impossible to prove the victim died at the scene or was intentionally killed, while hinting at possible accident or suicide based on personal journals David had inadvertently kept, despite prosecution proof that the files were fabricated. On September 20th, the final pre-trial conference was scheduled, and Judge Harris announced the trial would begin in early 2020. In an internal memo, Santos wrote briefly, "We do not have an intact body, but we have ample evidence of the hand that made it disappear." By month's end, the full 300 pages of evidence were printed, stamped confidential, and filed at Kent County Court, ready for the day justice would finally speak after a decade buried in silence. On January 6, 2020, exactly 10 years and 3 months after Elena Brooks vanished, the first-degree murder trial, State of Delaware v. David Brooks, officially opened at Delaware Superior Court. In Dover, presided over by Judge Michael Harris. The courtroom was packed with reporters and members of the public, as this was a rare cold case, successfully reopened through DNA and cell phone technology. The prosecution was represented by Rachel Mendez, with Lieutenant Maria Santos serving as lead investigative witness. The defense by attorney Thomas Kellerman. When David was brought in, he wore a gray suit and appeared calm, offering only a brief nod to the bench. Mendez opened with a nearly 3-hour presentation describing the decade-long investigation, from the evening of October 17, 2009, when Elena left church, to the discovery of evidence beneath the former home. She emphasized, DNA evidence, cell data, and document falsification show, not mere coincidence, but a deliberate plan. Mendez sequentially displayed maps of routes, cell tower diagrams, and traffic camera footage from the Roosevelt intersection, showing Elena's silver Toyota Camry arriving near Willow Creek at 8:57 p.m., matching the final text message sent to David. Forensic evidence followed, with Dr. Karen Lowe from the Delaware Medical Examiner's Office testifying as expert witness, presenting STR mixed DNA results. Bone, blood, and towel samples all matched the victim. Trace DNA on the plastic bag and towel matched David. She explained the extraction process, confirming no errors or contamination, leaving the courtroom in complete silence when she stated the random match probability was 1 in 5.8 million. Santos was then called to the stand, recounting the entire 2019 reinvestigation, discovery of Ambien residue, reconstruction of movements, and excavation. In a steady voice she described, "Every piece of evidence leads to one place, the southwest corner basement of 118 Willow Creek. That is where Elena Brooks died." When the prosecution introduced the plastic bag towel and tested bone fragments as exhibits, the bench ordered them resealed after presentation to preserve integrity. Mendez continued with digital evidence, 8 fabricated journal files from David's Dell in Spirin, forensically dated to after the disappearance. On the large screen appeared the text, "I want to leave in peace, with no one held responsible." When Mendez read it aloud, many in the gallery sighed, recognizing it matched David's 2009 statement word for word. Dr. Anna Patel's report concluded with 95% certainty the files were authored by a male, not the victim. Defense immediately objected that digital evidence can be altered, but prosecution produced original metadata with timestamps and an IP address traced to David's home, and the objection was overruled. Live witness testimony followed. Raymond Ellis, Royal Farms gas station clerk, took the stand and described the light rain that night when he saw Elena and David together in the silver Camry. Mendez asked, "Are you certain the man that night was David Brooks?" Ellis answered firmly, "I recognized the voice, and that face, I remember clearly." Next, Home Depot employee Melissa Grant confirmed selling cement, plastic sheeting, and cleaning chemicals to David 4 days before the disappearance, stating, "He asked me which cement dried in 2 hours. I've never forgotten that question." The recorded testimony highlighted premeditation. The climax came when prosecution played the 2009 recorded conversation between David and his old friend Samuel Carter. David's voice filled the courtroom. "I will help her be saved. I'm only doing what God told me." Many in the gallery lowered their heads in silence. When the recording ended, Mendez said, "No one can hear those words and still believe this was an accident." Defense countered that "be saved" was purely religious language with no proof of murder, but Mendez stressed, "In the forensic record, words and actions have met." Ambien, in the evidence and access to the drug by David Brooks himself. On the third day, technical investigators presented cell tower and GPS data. Technician James Rowe testified Elena's final phone signal stopped inside Willow Creek and never moved toward Killen's Pond. A 3D simulation of her route was shown, ending at the vacant lot behind the Brooks house, the exact spot where tire tracks and matching soil were found. This evidence completely dismantled the defense's accident at the pond theory. When called to testify in his own defense, David remained silent for most questions, answering only, "Don't remember" or "not sure." When asked if he wrote the journals for Elena, he replied, "I only wanted to tell her words." His low, trembling voice left the courtroom breathless. At the end of the session, Judge Harris concluded the evidence presentation, stating the chain of forensic, digital, witness, and financial proof had been consistent. He recessed court for jury deliberation. The day's minutes recorded, all witnesses legally verified, original exhibits preserved, testimony consistent with investigation findings. Case meets standards for first-degree murder prosecution. Outside, Dover's sky was cold and gray. Santos stood alone in the empty hallway, looking through the frosted window, and wrote in her notebook, 10 years, 3 weeks, and one final statement in court. Together they have become Elena's voice, no longer needing anyone to speak for her. On January 10, 2020, the trial entered its second week, focusing on presentation and challenge of scientific evidence. Prosecution began with confirmation testimony from Dr. Karen Lowe, director of the Delaware Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, who personally oversaw all 2019 evidence testing. She detailed the examination of bone sample E01 from the Brooks basement, describing DNA extraction using expanded 29 loci STR mix, yielding an absolute match to Elena Brooks' 2009 reference sample, with a random match probability of 1 in 1.2 billion. After displaying the genetic charts, she added that blood on the plastic bag, towel and fabric scrap F1 all contained the victim's DNA, plus male trace DNA matching the sample FBI collected from David in Tucson. Dr. Lowe also presented toxicology analysis showing both the fabric and towel were contaminated with zolpidem tartrate, the active ingredient in Ambien, a drug David had access to through his work. She explained, the concentration detected was sufficient to render an adult unconscious. Its presence on the items together with the victim's DNA proves contact occurred immediately before or at the time of death. When Mendez asked about soil origin, Lowe displayed energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy micrographs proving sample W03 from the basement contained kaolinite, silica, and cement ash. Composition identical to both the Willow Creek lot and the Quikrete cement purchased at Home Depot. To demonstrate chain of custody continuity, prosecution presented a visual evidence flowchart showing every sealed bag's tracking number, signatures, and storage timestamps from 2009 through 2019. Santos took the stand to confirm receipt of old evidence, describing how she discovered the previously untested fabric scrap in bag V09 and how the entire chain was resealed before delivery to the Delaware lab. According to the electronic evidence management log, no item was ever opened outside protocol. Defense attorney Kellerman countered that a 10-year custody chain could introduce errors, citing possible multiple handlers, including former officers, warehouse staff, and technicians, and raising risks of DNA cross-contamination or chemical alteration due to storage conditions. In response, Dr. Lowe presented the Delaware State Police Evidence Vault environmental report showing temperature, humidity, and sample controls remained stable from 2010 to 2019. She emphasized, no foreign DNA profiles appear on any sample, ruling out cross-contamination. Prosecution bolstered its case with testimony from court-appointed independent expert Professor Nathan Crow of the University of Maryland, who concluded Ester-Eber mix GC, MS and EDX methodologies all meet ISO 17025 standards. Results are fully concordant. I see no factor that could invalidate them. The bench permitted projection of the full custody timeline, proving every handoff was legally documented from initial 2009 discovery through storage to 2019 resealing. Kellerman continued to object, arguing that the absence of a complete body renders the forensic conclusion incomplete. Mendez countered, we have DNA, we have blood samples, we have traces of Ambien, we have soil from the crawl space, and we have an indirect confession on the recording. A body does not need to be intact to establish an intentional deprivation of life. When the prosecution asked the panel to examine the physical evidence, the forensic technician presented the actual samples in display cases, plastic bags, bath towels, fabric scraps, and bone fragments. Judge Harris ordered verification of the seal codes and confirmed they matched the inventory log. The presentation lasted more than 5 hours and ended with Dr. Lowe's firm statement, science is impartial, and every piece of data points to the same conclusion. Elena Brooks died inside her own home as a result of Ambien exposure and deliberate concealment. Afterward, defense attorney Kellerman asked the court to reconsider the legality of the FBI's collection of David's DNA from public trash in Tucson, calling it an invasion of privacy. The prosecution objected, citing the precedent in California v. Greenwood, which holds that collecting discarded trash does not violate the Fourth Amendment. Judge Harris agreed and declared the DNA evidence admissible. When Kellerman attempted to invoke religion, stating that David only acted out of a belief in salvation, Mendez replied, faith cannot be a shield for guilt. At the end of the day, the court recorded in the minutes chain of custody confirmed unbroken, defendants' objections regarding evidence tampering and privacy violations overruled. All forensic evidence admitted as basis for conviction. On January 15, 2020, after 2 weeks of continuous trial featuring more than 30 witnesses, 12 expert reports, and hundreds of pages of forensic records released into evidence, Judge Michael Harris declared the evidentiary phase closed. The jury of 12, 6 men and 6 women, was sent to deliberate at 10 a.m., taking with them all exhibits and transcripts. Outside the deliberation room, the atmosphere in the courtroom was heavy. Prosecutor Rachel Mendez sat with Lieutenant Maria Santos, silently staring at the Willow Creek map hanging at the far end of the room. Defense counsel Thomas Kellerman remained calm, still believing that the lack of an intact body would spare his client a first-degree murder conviction. Deliberations lasted nearly 10 hours. At 7:20 p.m., the clerk announced the jury had reached a unanimous verdict. As everyone returned to the courtroom, David Brooks entered to the clank of handcuffs. He kept a composed expression, only briefly glancing toward the public gallery, where no familiar faces remained. Judge Harris asked the jury to announce its verdict. The foreperson stood and stated clearly, "We, the jury of the state of Delaware, having considered all evidence and testimony, find the defendant David Brooks guilty of second-degree manslaughter and concealment of a corpse, in violation of Title 11, Section 636 of the Delaware Criminal Code." A moment of silence fell over the room. Mendez gave a slight nod while Santos tightly gripped the notebook that had accompanied her throughout the investigation. The judge polled the jurors on each count. All confirmed their agreement. Attorney Kellerman requested a postponement of sentencing to prepare an appeal, but the motion was denied for lack of new grounds. Immediately afterward, Judge Harris pronounced the sentence, "Considering the nature of the acts, the motive, and the prolonged concealment, the court sentences the defendant David Brooks to 15 years imprisonment at the Delaware Department of Correction, consisting of 12 years for manslaughter and 3 years for concealment of a corpse. Time served begins from the date of arrest. No parole eligibility for the first 8 years." Upon hearing the sentence, David showed no reaction, only closed his eyes and whispered something indistinct, perhaps a prayer. Outside, reporters crowded Mendez for a reaction. She said simply, "Justice doesn't always come quickly, but it still comes." In the court's written opinion, the judge noted, "DNA evidence, cell phone data, direct witness testimony, and fabricated documents clearly prove intent to conceal. Although the body is not intact, the victim has been identified, and the defendant's actions sufficiently constitute unintentional deprivation of life. The concealment of the corpse demonstrates calculated obstruction of justice." As David was led away, he turned for one last look at the back row, where Lieutenant Santos had stood. Their eyes met briefly, then she turned away. He was taken directly to Kent County Detention Center to await transfer to state prison. That evening, the Delaware courts released an official press statement. After a 10-year investigation, the disappearance of Elena Brooks has been resolved with the conviction of the primary suspect. The verdict demonstrates the power of scientific evidence and interagency federal-state cooperation. In the small office of the cold case unit in Wilmington, Santos opened her final notebook and wrote a closing line, "None of us saw that moment, but science spoke for her. Justice may arrive late, but it never forgets the way." In September 2021, nearly 2 years after David Brooks's conviction and sentencing, the Delaware State Police Cold Case Unit completed its final summary report for Case #09-DSP-1173, the disappearance and homicide of Elena Brooks. Lieutenant Maria Santos, who had led the reinvestigation, was tasked with drafting the case closing report. In the unit's small Wilmington office, she and her technicians compiled every document used from March 2019 through early 2020. 300 pages of forensic evidence, 186 pages of witness statements, 47 physical exhibits, 23 expert reports, and the entire digitized electronic data chain, backed up on 2 secure hard drives. The main report opened with the note, "After 12 years, the disappearance of Elena Brooks has been solved through DNA, financial, digital, and authenticated witness evidence." The evaluation concluded that this was the first cold case in Delaware history fully resolved through federal-state collaboration and the application of STR mix technology. Inside the file, Santos detailed every step from receiving the old evidence in 2019, discovering female DNA and ambient traces, matching crawlspace soil, collecting cell tower data, expanding the investigation, and finally excavating the basement at 118 Willow Creek. The report emphasized scientific factors and the perseverance of investigators proved the victim died at her residence, was concealed, and documents were falsified to mislead authorities. In the recommendations section, she proposed retaining all original exhibits, including DNA samples, bone fragments, plastic bags, towels, and the hard drive containing the forged diary, in the state's long-term evidence vault for at least 10 more years for training and educational purposes. The summary submitted to the Delaware State Police Superintendent was signed on September 14, 2021, officially changing the case status to closed, solved. The dark blue cover of the final report bore the embossed title, Delaware 2009 Cold Case Solved, File #09DSP 1173. A small internal ceremony was held that day at State Police headquarters. The superintendent declared, "The Elena Brooks case is proof of the power of forensic science and the determination of those who refuse to let the truth stay buried." As everyone left the room, Santos stayed behind, closed the thick file, and affixed the final evidence seal. Before placing it in the steel cabinet, she added one last line to her notebook. "From now on, Elena is no longer a missing person. She has been found in justice, not in silence." The official conclusion of the report read, Case #09DSP 1173, Delaware 2009 Cold Case Solved, closed September 2021. The story above is not merely a criminal case closed after 12 years, it is also a clear mirror reflecting faith, justice, and the value of perseverance in modern American society. The Elena Brooks case demonstrates the extraordinary progress of forensic technology, such as trace DNA STR mix analysis, mobile and digital data examination, which turns seemingly meaningless clues into decisive evidence. In a country that prizes truth, transparency, and legal fairness, this story reminds us that science, when combined with human determination, can deliver justice no matter how late. Yet on a deeper level, the case also shines a light on the darker corners of American family life, where emotional abuse, manipulation of faith, and deception can occur inside homes that appear perfectly peaceful. David Brooks's forging of his wife's diary and his use of religion to justify his actions serve as a warning to today's society. Faith cannot replace truth, and morality cannot be exploited to cover wrongdoing. In a nation that respects individual values and religious freedom, this story reminds us that everyone must learn to ask questions, seek evidence, and not let emotion or belief cloud reason. Ultimately, the greatest lesson from the Elena Brooks case is the power of perseverance and trust in the legal system. Even after more than a decade, the cold case unit never gave up. That is the true American spirit, always believing that the truth can never be buried forever if someone is brave enough to dig it up. If this story touches your belief that justice still exists no matter how many years pass, please subscribe to the channel so we can follow more cases solved through science and determination together. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next video, where another case thought to be lost to oblivion will once again be brought to light.